All right, thank you everyone, and welcome to day 3 of LibreFest 2025. I'm Justin Shorb again, and I wanted to encourage you to go back to that LibreFest 2025 course that we have in Academy Online. I have posted the 5 basic steps that I'll be talking about today as we walk through essentially the workflow for writing your own textbook. I think a lot of people did join LibreFest this year because they've got some desire to use OER text in their classroom, and they would like to either use one that exists, modify one that exists, or write their own that they maybe have been working on for sometimes decades. And so that's what we're going to start with today. And one reason that we do like to do this a couple days in after you experience all the other things that we have on LibreText is so that when you think about building your textbook, you create a textbook that actually helps to streamline your curriculum, as opposed to having a textbook that then you hang other things on top of later, and try to make it as cohesive for your students as possible. So as a quick reminder of today, we're going to go through this talk, but then we're going to have something else, some other talks on distributing ancillaries and project assets. So things that are outside of the textbook, but are kind of considered accompaniments to a textbook. And we'll hear a success story about that. And then we'll follow up this afternoon will be more of a guided walkthrough of using the remixer, which I will talk about today in terms of an overall workflow. And then following that, we'll have breakout rooms that will be focused on actually getting your book up and running, or your textbook map, wherever you are in your process. So first, we're going to talk about overarching. What is the flow for writing your textbook in LibreText or adapting one? So today we're going to talk about first the structure of the LibreText libraries, which we did briefly mention on Monday, but that was a long time ago, for me at least. And then talk about how to navigate the commons and what those mean. Learning about the LibreText Conductor, which is our project management system. And then learning about what it means to publish a LibreText book, and then knowing where you can go for further support, which I think that you've seen that part of it a lot, but I want to remind you that we do have more support. If you do go to academy.libretext.org or just libretext.org/academy, they're the same page. You can you can get to our Academy resources. We're the people who put on the LibreFest, the office hours, all the support tries to focus around this Academy, along with those online courses that you have access to. And there are a quick start guide and a construction guide that will get mentioned repeatedly. The quick start guide really is geared towards quick start for making a textbook. So if you need to share something with somebody else outside of this experience, that's a good place to point them to. The construction guide I would call a user manual for all of LibreText. So it has everything from Conductor to Adapt, and even our other platforms that we have. In fact, you can see here, they've got a lot on the remixer, but they also have those interactive elements, Adapt homework system, some basic Conductor informations, how to use the commons, things along those lines. So there's a lot of information in that construction guide, not just on how to construct things. I will point out as well, for those of you who happen to enjoy a little pedagogy or educational theories, the first couple pages in there are on designing and the frameworks for how to think about designing an online textbook. And that came actually as a little plug out of my graduate thesis work. So my work was on how to design textbooks for online experiences as opposed to text experiences. Can be interesting. We're going to refresh. Yes, of course, you all know that we have a bunch of libraries. Those libraries are listed here. Reminder that they each have different subsections, but specifically the foreign language ones, like the Ukrainian library and Espanol library and the global library, are actually collections of other libraries inside of them. So then you can find other libraries in other languages inside of those ones. So those ones are kind of unique in their layout. And they have different subsections that will either be a campus bookshelf, which are bookshelves for each campus that has published a custom book for their course. So you can make a custom book that has been made that is really useful for your syllabus, or you can make a book that is broadly useful for anyone teaching this course. Those are the ones that you typically think of as a generic textbook that you'd buy from a publisher. Those are the bookshelves area. They're separated by discipline, sub-discipline areas. And then learning objects, which would be where you would post laboratories or case studies or any of those sorts of materials that are really text-based or text and video-based, but they're learning materials that maybe have a kind of modular structure to them, standalone from a textbook, or could be mixed and matched with any textbook. So that's how our libraries are organized. So think about that when you're thinking about what do you want to build. Is it a set of laboratories? Is it a laboratory curriculum that actually walks through 5 steps? So it's really more of a lab exercise book that needs to be put together into one of those. Or is it a textbook that you just want to share with everybody? Or is it one that's really built more for the environment in Utah or something like that, which is only relevant to your specific area and would be more for your campus only? As I mentioned, do note that the humanities library is very broad. So if you're not sure where things look, check out that one. And as well as the business one has a lot of sub areas as well. The broader the field, obviously, the more things you might find within there. For instance, this one actually, composition, grammar, introductory, so disciplines, subdisciplines, that goes down and down and down when you get to that bookshelf. The library's management, because you can see so many different places to find things. I mostly wanted to show you that again for Monday, so that you'll realize that what the purposes of the Commons and the Conductor are. It's really, Commons is more like the front of house catalog management for all of the libraries and all of the projects that we're working on. It is our management back end, really, or sorry, it's the management front end. So customer facing kind of stuff if you've worked in the restaurant industry. Whereas the Conductor is really the back end. It's where things are getting built. We're talking amongst ourselves. The authors are communicating with each other. We're designing, we're developing, and we are curating things. That's where you control what is visible through the Commons. So you'll hear a lot of us say the Commons and Conductor, the Commons and Conductor. And that's because they really are essentially the same platform behind the scenes. One is just for the people that are managing and building and authoring. And then the Commons is the front end where people would go to find those materials and see those materials. So I kind of wanted to break up this authoring of a textbook so that you see the process really can be. One is starting off with what is already out there. So it's really good before you decide to write a book to figure out what books are already out there. And that starts off with the Commons. So what does the LibreText already have? LibreText Common, and then what else is out there? And we talked a lot yesterday about OER books out there in the world and what OER licensing is. So that's all taking a look at the Commons, what things would be existing. Conductor is where do you start and what do I do? So all those activities of doing things are going to be located in the Conductor. And at the very end, when you start thinking about publishing, the things that would go out there and disseminated into the world, you're thinking about what do you want your Commons page to look like? What resources do you want on your Commons page? Do you want to have a link there to your Adapt homework set? Do you want to have some ancillary resources available? Do you have everything accessible? Do you have everything tagged appropriately? What do you want your Commons page to look like? So those are kind of like the philosophy. You start off at the Commons to see what's out there, Conductor to get your work done, and then think about what you want your final published work to be found and then look at inside there. So these are the 5, by the way, that are in the LibreText Academy online course. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can kind of follow along with kind of the philosophy and some just little tidbits there for reference. Before I do get started, I do want to make it very clear what is editing and authoring in LibreText library. So the libraries have those campus bookshelves, or ancillary materials if they're there for that library. But they also have some hidden ones that you only see when you're logged in. Your book, when you go to write it, will go into the workbench. That workbench is a hidden one. No one else can even see it unless they are logged in as an instructor in that library. And even if they're logged in as an instructor in that library, they can't read your book unless you tell them that you give them permissions. So these are all things that are unpublished. They can't be found by Google. People won't stumble across them. A lot of people are very worried about putting something out there until it's in a form that they're okay having their name on. And that's perfectly reasonable and good. So you do have this unpublished step first. So you can do a lot of messing around, playing with it, and you can make test books and you can play around. And today we will make a test book together. And that will go into the workbench and nobody else can see it except for the people you give permissions to. Once you publish it, it has to go into either a campus bookshelf, a bookshelf, or into some sort of ancillary materials area, where it will become public. However, the actual abilities of you to edit your book don't stop when you publish it. These are living books. You can continue to edit them. You can continue to modify them. And again, only the people you give permission to will be able to edit them. So many people, because of I want to use this textbook in the spring, have to publish things before they're really in the state that they want them to be published. That's okay. If that needs to happen, that needs to happen. Put things in the good shape as possible, publish them. You can continue to build your book. You continue to add chapters. You can continue to modify pages even after it's published. But we wanted to make sure people knew there is a time where things are not available so you can feel comfortable to make mistakes and move things around and make large scale changes before you start publishing. We obviously don't want you to request to publish things until they're usable by somebody, but usable is a lot lower of a threshold than polished, right? So just keep in mind there that you can still edit afterwards. If you're ever confused about whether or not a page you're looking at is something that is available for you to share with other people, there are these page restrictions here, and those will say either public, which means it's been published and anyone can find it, or it'll say usually semi-private, which means that it's only permissions given to certain people. And you'll also notice that there's a big rainbow bar across if this is a book that is published, because things like printing and downloading files and having full compiled PDFs, those are not available until you publish the book. We don't use our resources to make those for every step along the way. You can still get a PDF. So you see the PDF button down here. You can still get a PDF of a single page if you just happen to be somebody who wants to see how that PDF looks, but you won't be able to get a full compiled PDF until your book is actually published to a library. And then the Conductor project button will only be available, that button will only go to your Conductor project for people who are allowed to. And though that button actually does exist for unpublished books, just the one I happen to choose didn't have a Conductor project at that point. No, you do. To answer the question about Campus Bookshelf, you do not have to be a LibreNet member to have a custom book inside of a thing. So if you were at an institution like University of the Virgin Islands, where I was a professor, that doesn't have a LibreNet membership. But if I published something while I was a professor there, it would still go into a UVI bookshelf on that library. The limit for that is your institution cannot have more than 5 custom books from your institution published across all 16 libraries, unless you are a LibreNet member. At that point, your campus is using our resources enough that they really do represent a collection of OER books. And at that point, we ask that you become a LibreNet member, and then you'll actually get your own commons, which I'll show you what your commons look like for your institutions. And that's what the LibreNet membership covers, along with some other things as well. Let me see if there's any other questions. Oh, I think that Jennifer just answered that for me, which is great. So let's start off with first figuring out what's available. Before you think about what you need to build, think about what we already have. And I say what we, meaning LibreText already has, because if LibreText already has something pretty similar, that at least gives you an idea of how you might change that in a very quick and easy fashion. It makes your life a lot easier before we look to see what else is out there somewhere else. So let's go through and find a book on the Commons. So I have some slides just in case the internet gets weird, but I'm gonna do this live with you. Then you can go along with me. From any page that you're at, you can click that little launchpad icon. And from there, we're going to go visit the Commons. And I do encourage you, if you can, to follow along with me, because this afternoon's session on remixing will assume that you have already started your book. So if you don't have a book already and you've never ever done this before, do follow along, even if it's going to be just a testing book right now. Great. So once you're in the Commons, I'm going to point out a couple things. We've got a catalog, which is what you're used to seeing all the time. We also have a collection. So if you know of a good collection of books that exists, so there's Lumen Learning, OpenStax has some books. Well, actually, OpenStax, yeah, there it is. And then there's some MIT courseware. A lot of these collections might already exist. So if you already know a collection exists and you know their book looks pretty good, you can go straight to that collection. Otherwise, if you know the subject area, you can do library and subject. So if I did chemistry or biological chemistry, possibly, I can start to drill down pretty quickly just by subject area. Our tagging is not completely robust. So there's some things that might be missed in this, but it's a good place to go look for it. And And even the library, especially for those of you who are in very interdisciplinary fields, sometimes it's harder to figure out which library you might want something from. So you can just search through things here. And then you can find lots and lots of books. You can go through and find a lot of these with the person who wrote it, where the school is, or if it's a general book, what library it's in, whether or not it has assets. So those would be if it has some sort of materials associated with that book. I'm gonna go ahead and click on the OpenStax one. You can find the PowerPoint presentations that are available there. You can find links to the book, read it online right there, along with down below, we talked about yesterday what the license is. Unsurprisingly, OpenStax books publish with one given license for the whole book. So the whole book has one given license. But it gets you to see that and how many pages there are. I'm going to go back to the regular collections commons. So you can search a lot of those things. One thing that I like to do, just because if I don't know where something's going to be, and you saw me do this yesterday, if I did go to Google and I would type in some longer phrase like fair use license for education, site:/libretext.org. So this, if you didn't know, is a little search engine trick that will only return results that have libretext.org in the URL. So it's a way to search any collection of any book library. I like to use it because it's really kind of cool to see who is using similar things. So yesterday I showed you that there's some of this stuff in the social sciences library, the humanities library, the workforce library. And once you see it, you go, oh, of course, all those people are going to have a different perspective on those things. And I wouldn't have not known that those kind of topics would be from lots of areas. But this way you can kind of get some, I would say, more context-based stuff that could be more into the details, which large search engines are quite good at. But it can still give you those information. So if you do happen to find one that you liked, you can always go to that book. And even if, yeah, so this is actually one that is in campus bookshelves in Western Washington University. So this would be a book that actually would be hard to find if you were to go to the bookshelf and then into the subdiscipline, because it's actually in a campus bookshelf published for that person's course. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and take this. I'm going to copy that name. And in the catalog, you can always search by name very nicely. There it is, the workforce book that we were just looking at. So you can find that book quite easily. And there you can see that's licensing and all the materials and where it was. Okay, so that gives you a good introduction to this. For our campus administrators and things like that, we do have campus commons. So if you're not sure what we were talking about at all when we mentioned LibreNet a few minutes ago and publishing books for your collection, if you're a LibreNet member, you do get your own campus commons. So I want to go, let's go to Irvine Valley College because I was just working with them. This is their branded campus commons, and it behaves the exact same way as the regular campus commons, but your OER administrator, whoever that might be, has the power to add books to it, make the collections however they want. So for instance, this word collections could be departments. If your institution wanted to have an individual library for each department, you can publish things there. You could make a difference between books that were published or built by people at your campus, or just every single zero textbook cost book that you use on campus, which could include books that are just used off the shelf from LibreText, and not just ones that are authored by your faculty. That's kind of nice, especially for stakeholders, if you want to show, here's our collection of free books that we're giving students. That's a nice thing to do there. So this one right here, Irvine Valley College has more than 5 here, and they are a LibreNet member. Once you get above 5, then we think that it's worthwhile to have your own campus commons and become a member. Okay. We'll jump back here. Carl, we'll have a lot of talking about the editing today and tomorrow. So make sure to hold on to that question when we talk about embedding videos tomorrow. I'm skipping over these because they're basically just what I walked through live in case that didn't work. Second, if you're looking around online or you know in your field, somebody's written a book that everybody loves to use on some other platform, but it is open, but it's great that it's open and you'd love to use it, but you don't want to use it the way they did it, or you have your own material you'd like to add. And it is actually a lot of cognitive overload for students to have to say, I'm going to read chapter 2.5 here, chapter 7 out of this book, and I'm going to use these 5 hyperlinks to go back and review later. It's much easier to put them all into one place and to make it easy for your students to go through those. That's what LibreText remixing is for. So it allows you to put all these things into just, for instance, Unit 1 readings. Done. Those are all the pages that need to be talked about and read through for Unit 1 and nothing else. So if there are other materials out there, you should be able to go out there and find them. So just to let you know, that's how we've built a lot of our maps. So although I mentioned this yesterday, this is a map of this book. So that is a book that's actually not OER, but we can put the content from other books and make them into something that's useful for a faculty member who's used to using that book in that order. So that's a remix of our content into a different order that kind of correlates to that. This OpenStax book here, it's an openly available book. We have a good relationship with OpenStax. We talk to the operator, the founder over there quite often. We have a different philosophy about how OER works and how it can be used. So we can harvest those books into our library so that faculty can do the remixing that they want instead of having some polished one version of a book that everyone uses all the time. So we do have these open content that can be remodified, used per the licenses. And then we have some other books that we can pull in different ways. And over here, I show one example of a faculty member who did take all the books from those other sections and put everything, forget about chapter numbers. I'm just going to put Unit 1 exam and all the books under Unit 1 exam. That's what your students need to read for Unit 1. So that's really the organization that makes sense for them. So there's different ways to go about that. So just think a little bit about that, how you want to design your book before you even get to thinking about what it is that you want to write. So we're still well before the writing period right now. We're still in the explore, see what's out there, and think about how we might map our materials in a way that's useful for our students. Taking things from us, taking things from elsewhere. Within that within the construction guide, there's actually this nice list of mechanisms for writing. So now that we've talked about what's out there, what do we have, what is missing from there, and we might need to contribute, how do we want to write that material? And there's really 5 mechanisms that we've talked about in detail. One, you can have students help you write it. Maybe have extra credit assignments, make them rewrite material, maybe have them rewrite example problems for you as part of your assignments. A lot of the LibreText has actually been written this way. As you know, Delmar started LibreText as the ChemWiki way long time ago. It was a wiki so people could write things in it. And a lot of that material from chemistry came from his students writing those as extra credit assignments and then contributing them with a license to be used by future students. That's called open pedagogy. And that's been used extensively here at LibreText. Mechanism 2 is student integrating existing content outside libraries. So we mentioned before, a lot of government data is freely available. Maybe there's other OER resources out there or news articles that you might be able to link to, not necessarily use their content, but talk about those current event things. This is something that we'll hear a lot about from one of our success stories this week. For a few people who work in fields that are changing rapidly with the current political climate, with the change of climate and environmental climate, I mean, those things and those data points change from year to year. Having a textbook that can evolve very quickly can be a useful thing to involve students in as well. Mechanism 3 is the one that I think most people think that writing a textbook should be, which is I have a blank page in front of me and I have a terminal degree in this field, and I will be writing the book. That is the one that takes the most time, and it's the one that is, in my experience, the least likely to actually finish because it takes so much effort to do everything from scratch. But that is a mechanism that people can use and have used. Mechanism 4, faculty integration of existing content outside the LibreText platform from other faculty and experts. So that's basically not using students to do that legwork as part of their learning experience, but instead doing all of that learning on your own and then incorporating that into books. And then mechanism 5, this is the one that we kind of push people to as much as possible. It's just faculty and students working together to build new content, to think about how things can be organized, what would be helpful to you when you're studying, what would be helpful to me to know that you're getting the material that you need in a relevant way. So remixing that is a very collaborative way to build textbooks. And I think is the most likely to succeed because you have to give your students deadlines, and then you have to give yourself deadlines to get that stuff back to your students. So suddenly you're using your course time and planning to give yourself your own deadlines for building content. And it starts with something that's already there, which is always a lot easier than trying to start from scratch. So we talked a little bit about what else is out there, how new content can be created, what things you could do to create new content. So let's get started. Now we want to build that book. So to build that book, I think I actually want to jump over to this inside of your guy in the textbook construction workflow. I do have a link for this documentation on a remixing map. And this is kind of talking about what the remixer is, and we're going to talk a lot of detail about it, but basically it's a drag and drop way to build your table of contents. So if you have your table of contents and you're building that, a good idea is to come up with a map before you even get into the remixer. So we recommend using a spreadsheet, something like this, where you're going to come up with your own chapters, your modules, your units. You're going to maybe think about what you want to cover in those areas, kind of pre-planning your learning objectives and your outcomes. And then you can start to go out there and find materials, either on LibreText or elsewhere. Paste those links in here to what you might want to use in the future. You don't have to put any more documentation than the links, and I'll show you why. And you can also start using Adapt if you wanted to start doing that too. So look at different things you could build. You can get more than one link in there, more than one page. However you want to do it. Here's another example of somebody who's using it line by line. This is a very complicated example that somebody shared with us of going section by section for, I think this one, for general chemistry, the sections they want to use, the numbering they're going to use, and then what maps they're going to use for different areas. This has a lot of good examples to kind of get you thinking about how do you want to plan your book. And then once you plan the book, you can start building it out, fleshing it out, thinking about that structure that you want to use from a pedagogical standpoint. And before you even get into remixing, if you do happen to, in the last process, come up with the fact that there's material that's not in LibreText that you would like to use, and that material is OER licensed, then you can harvest that and ask us to harvest that for you. Or if you have material from your Blackboard course that you've used for ages, and you want to release it into an OER library for other people to use as well, we can also harvest those things. So what does that look like? We do have a harvesting team headed up by Preeti, and we can get materials in all different formats. And I put a link inside of your LibreText Academy Online as well to our harvesting request form. We can take things from all these different sources. It's linked there. It doesn't really matter. But the main thing I want to point out here is we've taken a lot of things with a lot of experience from other places into our HTML website. So we have a lot of conversion that we can do in-house quite automatically. So don't hesitate to utilize that feature. I will say that LibreNet members, institutions, and members of cohorts that are working with our academy on authoring a textbook do get priority harvesting. But we do get to the harvesting projects as we can throughout the year. So get them in early if you can, or join an academy cohort, and we'll talk about that on Friday. There's the picture of the harvesting request, or if you don't have that link handy, if you're logged into the conductor, there is a harvesting request button on that left-hand panel. Okay. So notice that I have not talked about authoring anything yet on LibreText. We're still in the planning, finding, and building phase of just getting your resources together. So this is still a process of, I found something out there and now I need to bring it into LibreText as a resource, or rather have the LibreText team bring it into LibreText before I even think about how I'm going to put it in my course. But you need to get it there first. Let me see, there's something in the chat. I don't think you need to worry about when you get to the remix, and you can go ahead and when you get the remix this afternoon, I think you'll see the answer to that question and from the talk yesterday. That we'll take care of the licensing and what gets edited for you. And this gives us to our first time of actually trying to build something in LibreText, so we're ready to remix. How do we get to the remixer? Where do we get to it? Oops, I actually left this on here from my previous slide, but it's not. We're going to do this today, not next month. And I'm just going to delete that live. So we're going to get into getting started with the remixer and having our textbook map and where we're going to go from there. And that brings us to the doing part of the steps, which is going to the LibreText conductor. And I have a bunch of slides here that I can share with you, but I'm going to do this live with you. And I'm going to do it by first clicking on the Launchpad. And this is a part you should definitely follow along with. Once you're in the Launchpad, I want you to go to the conductor now. We're in the actions of doing, not finding. So the doing is the conductor. And when you go to the conductor, right now, most of you probably only have one project, and that's the LibreFest 2025 project that you're all a part of. And in very big green button at the top, which almost looks like a header, but it's actually one big, huge, large button, is a create a conductor project. Okay. And I am actually going to create one within our conductor so that nobody else does it on accident. So I'm going to, what you would do is create a conductor project, make a title, and you can make it private, and then go ahead and create that. You can call it test, you can call it the name of your course, whatever you want to call it. It's all going to go in the workbench. It's all going to be private. No one will see it but you. If you guys know how to use Zoom's Reacts, give me thumbs up when you've got your project built and you see a blank project in front of you. I see it more and more thumbs up. I'm liking it. This is great. Cool, cool. So once you do that, oops. You should have a box that's empty. It should probably say classification harvesting. It'll say important actions, and you're only going to have one option here, and it's a green button called Create Book. All right. So if you click that Create Book, this is the first choice that you're going to have to make, which is which library you want that to go into. If you're confused about which library to go into, because you teach something quite interdisciplinary, I would go with the library that in the step 0 phase, you found the most resources. So if you found most of your other books in the business library, then put your book in the business library, because that makes sense that the content's going to be in a similar area that a lot of other people have published it. So I would go with what is most common, because then we can put it in a place that makes sense along with the context of other things that you're going to be looking at. It doesn't necessarily have to go with it, but you know, people who are in the chemistry world, it's easy. We have a chemistry library. Our courses all start with CHEM. We're usually pretty good. That makes pretty intuitive sense. So I'm going to make this in the chemistry library because that's what I'm used to it. And I'm going to make this book there. And I'm going to mute myself for just 1 second. Apologize for that. I had something happening on my computer that was making lots of random noises, and I needed to stop. All right, so this one says a lot of people don't have access. I think everybody should have access. I'm not sure how you all got instructor verifications without being access to this library. If you don't have, you do need to be a verified instructor. So I will say, if you go to this homepage of your conductor and you do not see this green verified instructor thing, and you see something like waiting for verification or needs to request verification, you need to be a verified instructor in order to make anything in the LibreText. So make sure that you're there, and that when you click on verification, that you request the library that you want to put your book into. We by default give access to pretty much all but the language libraries, because most people that are requesting access only need access to the standard library set. And once you have that access, you should be able to do that. So if you're not verified, please do make sure that you're verified before you do that. And we do have breakout rooms where we're going to work hand in hand later today if you do need to work through that slower. All right, so once you do that, now you have a library associated with your project. Before that, you didn't have a library associated with your project. And you can click on the Open Project link, and you can click on the Open OER Remixer. These are now your important actions. This was before where you saw the Create Book link. Okay. Now that you have created a book, now you have the two different tools that go into that book, which are opening the book to go look at it and opening the OER Remixer to build it. So when you click on Open OER Remixer, this is where you'll build that map. If you see something that says demonstration mode here, just make sure that you're signed in the corner and it says your name. If you're not, click on sign in. And I would say close this and then reopen the remixer. It's always better to make sure you're signed into the library before you open the remixer. Just makes things work a lot smoother without any hiccups. And you'll know that you've successfully made it because you should have two gray panels. One, which is your empty book with just an empty first chapter. And then over here, you should see just the three at the top, which are the published books. Instructors can only do the published books. You can only remix from published books. I can remix from everything because I happen to be in the admin mode. Yep, Joy. I always make sure that it's there. If you do have to do it, I actually just keep going back to here and clicking Open Remixer over and over again until it makes sure it opens with everything looking just nicely. So we're going to have a step-by-step guide to making these later. And Josh is going to walk through that this afternoon. But for right now, I just want to point out that you can add new pages. So if I clicked on the the top of the book and add that, it adds a chapter right here. And I can drag that to where I want it to go. And I can add another chapter. And if I click on a book icon, which is a chapter, and I click the plus sign, I get a page, which is going to be a section in that. And everything else is just drag and dropping. So this is where you want to build that table of contents from the map that we spent time making earlier. So I would encourage you, maybe if some of your off time, if you want to use some of your break or your lunch time to just come up with a couple things that you might want to remix in today's activities, then find at least a few things. And I did send you an email yesterday in the conductor to go try to find something that would be useful for you to try playing with today when we do this hands-on thing this afternoon. But that is how you get to do everything, is through the conductor. The conductor also manages your team. So you can remember who's a member, a lead, liaison, or an auditor. So when you create it, you're the lead automatically. The lead is in charge of who's on the team. Okay, so that's the person who can add the members of the team, who are authors, who are other things. So you become a team lead. You can add team members. Team members have all editing access. Think of those as co-authors. So those are people who have authoring access on your book, and they automatically are granted authoring access. You can also do project auditors. This might be what you want to give access to your OER librarian, who is maybe giving you a grant to write this book and wants to watch your progress, or chime in conversations about things, or ask you questions about things, or you want them to have them take a look at things. They have read-only access to your book. They cannot edit your book, but they can do read access. If you do want to work with an OER librarian or somebody on your staff or your department chair or something like that, who might want to offer support and help as maybe a copy editor or someone who's going to actually do some formatting editing, then make sure not to give them liaison access. Give them member access so they can actually edit things. And you can change that at any time. If you need to add people, you can do it by email. And then they'll get an invite link. or preferably just look for their name here. You can find their name here and then click them. So if they're already membered and logged in and they're already instructor on LibreText, then they will show up in the search and you can find the person that you need. All right. Actually, I'm kind of just liking going through this way, so I'm not going to use all the slides there. You shouldn't have to use the resync access, but that's if you find that you've added someone as an author and they don't have author access. You can click the resync book. It just resyncs the permissions from conductor to your book. It should be automatic. I've almost never had to use that button ever. But if you do see it, it's a good first try to try something to make sure that the publishing, the access is all good. Hopefully that answered your question, Bob. All right. Other things that you can do here. You can add some little notes here. That is done with the same place you edit all these properties, which is under the edit properties. The projects all start as open or in progress. If you really want to mark things as completed, you can. They kind of drop off your list on your conductor. So if you have a bunch of them and they get completed, this is probably more useful for people who are managing a whole team of teams on your campus. Maybe there's 20 people all building books and you want to keep track of which ones are actually done. That's probably good. If it's your own book, they're probably always in progress and whatever works for you. Classification, most people do a construction. So they're working on their book, they're building it. It'll all start as harvesting because typically that's our first step. Yeah, there's some good notes there. And then you'll see that we have some other miscellaneous ones that we use for ourselves because we use the conductor for all of our projects management. We don't use it just for writing books. We use it for everything. And then you can make it visibility for things to see, for if you want people to find your book and then join it. So all those things can be set there, along with your thumbnail, which is what people will see if they search for your project on our Commons page. And I'll show you that in a minute. We do also have an AI co-author. A lot of these things will be done at the end of your book, so you don't really need to worry about co-authoring tools until the very end. But when it comes to it, it's super helpful. We can do some actions for your metadata. So we don't have anything that's going to help you write your book. That's not what we do here. We're not a generative AI firm. We're not interested in making a bunch of large language model textbooks out there. But what we are interested in is making sure people can find things easily and to make sure that things are accessible. So those are the main things that we start with. So we do have something for generating summaries. That is when you go to a book and you go to a chapter, these little blurbs that explain what each of these sections are on, those are called those chapter or section summaries. So if you're wondering why your book doesn't have these little blurbs that explain what's on that page, that's because you haven't set their summary. And that can be a pain in the neck to write. And AI is very good at taking your text and summarizing it in 2 or 3 sentences. So it gives you a good first draft at that. We also have generating tags. So tags are the things that would go into this box here by hand, and they help to make your index for your book. So if you want to be able to say how many pages or what pages are marshes discussed in my book, well, marshes are discussed on this page, and this page. That's auto-generated by LibreText as long as those pages have been tagged with it. And AI can help you to tag all of your pages for you. And of course, you can edit them, delete them, add them, whatever you want to do, but it gives you a good selection to choose from off the bat. One example of what you might want to get rid of is if you wrote a book on ecosystems and then AI tagged all of your pages as ecosystems, you might want to delete ecosystems from all of your pages because you don't want to say that ecosystems is discussed on all 400 pages of my book. That's redundant. It's in the title of the book. So you can still edit those at the end and get rid of them. We might do a little demo though if people want to see it later. And then we can also generate alt text for images automatically. Because that is kind of a pain to do. And having a starting point is great. So those are the only 3 things that we do for automated co-author. In addition, we also have an accessibility checklist, which once you have a book with pages, they will appear here. If they don't appear, you can sync that table of contents there. And this gives you a nice checklist of all the different things that you should check or have a team on your campus. A lot of campuses have some sort of accessibility guru who can help faculty in the learning center or something like that. This is a nice place for you guys to collaborate on this. So you can invite them as a liaison maybe to your book, and then they can work with you on your chapters. And then there's a threaded discussion here. So you can have a discussion just about that accessibility and what you're fixing, how you're working on it, what things that you want to discuss, whether or not it's good, bad, however you want to go about that. And that can really help faculty to feel more confident that what they're putting out there is accessible and meets the best guidelines that they can. So I'm going to scroll down. You should be familiar with this discussion link. I know I've had at least one email of somebody who says they get an email from us with ... after it, and they don't know how to read the rest of it. Well, if you click on that conductor link, it should have taken it to here. And here is where the longer version of those emails are. So that email I sent you yesterday, that's right there. Delmar sent you one, I think, last night. And that's the email that he sent you. You might have gotten only the first paragraph and then ... You do get emails to say there's been conversations happening in your project, but you will have to go to the conductor in order to follow those conversations, and you can have threaded conversations along the way. And then here is where you can manage your assets. So assets are those supplemental materials, your PowerPoints, your worksheets, your instructor guides, your sample syllabi, things like that. You can also put things up there that are just for your team to view. So they're not public, they're just assets for maybe the original PDFs that this book came from, or a document that you wrote to use in your classroom once that you wanted to share with your collaborators so that they can see it. It's a way to keep all of your resources combined, and you can set who's allowed to see those. And Delmore is going to talk about that in the next session, so I'm not going to cover much of that, but just to let you know that that's also managed here. And at the bottom, we also have a task list. So you can bulk add a whole bunch. I'm going to add 5 tasks to this, and I'm going to work on chapter. And I'm going to add a subtask that was just 2. And I just bulk created a work on chapter 1, work on chapter 2, work on chapter 3, and some subtasks here that are editing around 2.1, 2.2. So that way I can edit those pages, of course, but maybe you want to just kind of bulk create a whole bunch of things. Inside of there, you can also see these plus signs for tasks where I can assign things. I don't say plus sign for that adds a subtask. I wanted to edit the task. There, view it. It's currently available. I can assign this one to Jennifer because I make her do all of my work. Just kidding, but she's great. And assign her to all the subtasks. She got a message. She's assigned, and this one is still available, but you can put it in, mark it as in progress. Oh, it did mark it out. Great. You can make dependencies and say this task really can't be done until this one's completed. So if you really wanted to work with a group of people that needs like that kind of tag team, or if you're a librarian that'd like to keep track of these things. And you also have your discussion thread here. So we try to keep the discussions about the tasks, about the accessibility, about the project as a whole. Each of these things have their own threaded discussion, so you can keep track of those things. And if you do happen to add a bunch of timelines here, this will also populate a timeline, which is available at the top with a nice little Gantt chart and across the way for each one. I haven't assigned any dates for starts or ends for these tasks, so I don't have a Gantt chart here, but then you can do that. So anything that you want to do for project management, especially if you're working with a team that has like a year or 2-year long progress that you're going to be working on this, then you can start to really manage that in a useful way. Let me flip through my slides. Yep. We did all these things, source properties. Awesome. I talked about those and just making sure, like I said, I like to have slides back up just in case websites don't load well on my own presenting. Cool. Once your book is actually published, then you'll end up having a couple other actions here. This is viewing the textbook on the Commons page. You do not get a Commons entry until it's published, right? It won't go to the public available search engine until it's published. But you can visit the project and the textbook on the Commons once it's available. And that looks like Launchpad, Commons. We've talked a lot about books, but you can also search projects. So if you're looking to see who has been working on or has a publicly available project on, let's say, GOB chemistry. There's someone here who's working on a slide deck for organic chemistry. There's somebody working on introductory laboratories and somebody working on books, a survey of chemistry book that's going on there. And these are all projects. We introduced thumbnails to projects pretty late, so most of them don't have thumbnails, but you can see a couple of them do. And this way you can actually see some of those projects that are working, that are going along here. And Delmar is going to talk a little bit more about how projects can be used as repositories as well. All right, I'm going to leave that one because I know we're going to talk about those a little bit later. And we're going to talk about those next as well, but give you a preview. There's reader resources that appear on books that you can manage from your conductor. So those are materials that students see. You can manage whether or not things are public or private for your assets, all within the conductor. Communication, all within the conductor, can be done there. This is also very helpful, I would say, if you're going to have help from one of us, then we can actually have a discussion with you there. But if your discussion is, oh, I've only been emailing my colleague about these things, well, then that makes it difficult for us to see what the history of where things might have been issues. So it also helps us as the LibreText team to help you to diagnose things. All right, and I talked about that. Great. So that's the conductor. How do you do it? How do you build things? And where do you go from there? You want to publish this. So again, I said that was going to be something that's going to go to the Commons. You're going to have your material out there. And that's where it's going to change from the semi-private to public, and you're going to get all of these options that were not there before. That's what publishing will do. But you can still edit it. I want to emphasize that again. These are not published as in bound and on a desk somewhere. They are still live books. They can still be edited. You can still update them. So you can do your request for publishing, and that should be that button right there. And when you do that, you'll fill out some form. And if you have some other instructions, you can leave it in your conductor in a thread somewhere in your information, so that we can look at that when we go to your project and take a look at it to see what sorts of things you want to do, such as what are the list of authors you want, make sure that the licenses all look good if you wanted to make any notes of that, or any questions you have for us along the way. And we'll ask you any questions about your publishing inside the conductor itself. So we won't be emailing you about the conductor, about the publishing process. We'll keep it all within this process here. Coming up, because I want you guys to think about this, when you're thinking about building your book, all of our interactive things are actually available to be embedded in your book. You can embed adapt questions in your book as formative assignments. You can embed H5P. You can embed videos. You can embed molecule structure rotating. You can embed interactive Calc 3D plots. A lot of these things can be embedded right in there. You saw the example of using Jupyter Binder embedded in your book. So the goal of making your book for your class is not to just really quickly give something that's just a base of knowledge for people to go to. It's a place for your students to learn. And so I want to emphasize that when you're thinking about building your book better than the one before it, think about how you want people to engage in it. Everyone probably knows that students these days are not the type to sit down and read and then take notes and then go to class the next day. That's not the paradigm of how people interact with computers or with their phones. So having some thought into, even if you want to get students to that point, how are you going to scaffold them to read your material in a way that is going to engage them and teach them how to think about how they're learning? Those are skills that we all learned along the way, and that we want to impart on our students. So with that, I think I probably went a little bit longer, but hopefully I gave up a little bit of time. I think, Delmar, you're next, right?
Yes.
Oh, any questions before I jump off of this? A lot of your questions will probably get answered throughout the rest of today and tomorrow. This was really an overarching, the nuts and bolts of getting through this process, and then we'll teach you the how to do all those things and the whys throughout the next day and a half.